They laughed at him, mocked his uniform, assumed he was beneath them. But when the black waiter they tried to humiliate revealed who he truly was, their smug grins vanished. This isn't just a story about standing up to disrespect. It's about quiet dignity, generational pride, and the moment one man changed everything without raising his voice. Stay to the end, because the lesson they learned might just change you too. The evening sun spilled golden streaks across Clearwater Beach, Florida. The water shimmered like polished glass, catching every hue of the fading light. The Horizon Lounge stood like a modern temple by the sea-sleek exclusive and designed for those who believed elegance could be reserved. On the wooden deck, guests lounged under striped canopies, sipping cocktails that took 5 steps to craft. Malik Sanders adjusted his perfectly pressed white shirt, the cuffs sharp, his black shoes shining like obsidian. He moved with the quiet precision of someone who had walked this path for years, not just as a server, but as something far deeper. Because Malik wasn't just any staff member. He was the son of the man who built this place from the ground up. But no one knew that. Malik had chosen to work from the bottom, just like his father once did, to understand the foundation beneath the glamour. But today his heart felt heavy. He had just left the hospital where his world was battling late-stage cancer. He didn't cry, he couldn't afford to. He just needed tonight to be calm. But fate had a lesson waiting louder than the tide. The lounge was humming with the rhythm of soft jazz and clinking glassware when Table 7 was seated. They arrived like they owned the coastline, 4 tourists, loud, confident, oozing entitlement. The man with slicked back blonde hair wore a Rolex the size of a teacup saucer. He dropped into his chair with a casual arrogance and let his legs sprawl out. "Ah, they sent us their best," he sneered, locking eyes with Malik. Malik smiled politely, not because he was amused, but because he had seen this act before. The type who mistake price tags for personality. He held his notepad, voice measured. "Would you like a recommendation from our special?" "Not from someone like you," interrupted the woman with brunette waves and diamond-studded sunglasses. She didn't even look up from her phone. The table laughed. Malik didn't. He clenched the edge of the notepad, slightly, barely noticeable. He'd been spoken to like this before. Brushed aside, dismissed. But tonight, something in him stirred. Maybe it was the weight of his mother's diagnosis, or maybe it was the quiet fire passed down from a father who once stood in his very shoes. As Malik walked back toward the bar, he heard them laughing behind him. "Did you see how serious he looked?" One of the men chuckled, like he's managing a Fortune 500 company or something. The brunette woman chimed in, "I bet he goes home and drinks cheap vodka from plastic cups. Probably thinks Hennessy is a luxury label." Their laughter pierced the coastal air like glass cracking under pressure. Malik didn't break stride. His face remained unreadable. But inside something tightened. Not anger, not shame. Just a quiet awareness that these weren't new insults, only recycled ones. He'd heard them all before in different tones from different mouths, but they all tasted the same bitter. Luis, the elder bartender, who'd worked with Malik's father years ago, glanced up. "Want me to take that table instead?" he offered quietly. Malik shook his head. "No, I've got this." He began selecting rare spirits from the top shelf. He moved with deliberate grace, each bottle, each pour a statement. If they wanted to test him, fine. He wouldn't fight fire with fire. He'd pour them a lesson in glass. Malik returned with the drinks, 5 elegant glasses glistening under the warm lights, garnished with herbs, citrus peels, and precision. They looked like they belonged on the cover of a luxury travel magazine. He placed each glass in front of them carefully, his movements quiet but purposeful. But before the last drink even touched the table, the sneer returned. Logan, the blonde one, took a sip and dramatically gagged. "Whoa, what is this, a science experiment?" Madison followed, fake gasping after her first taste. "Did you just throw random expensive stuff together and pray it worked?" she said with a snort. Drew, the quieter one, sniffed his drink like a sommelier in a comedy sketch. "It's got that artisanal hipster trying too hard vibe," he mocked. Laughter erupted. A few other tables turned to glance, but as usual, no one intervened. Malik stood still. This wasn't about the drinks. It was about making him the joke, something for them to poke at, belittle, then forget. He'd seen it before. The privileged loved turning service workers into entertainment, a stage for their superiority. But Malik didn't flinch. Not this time. Because he wasn't just holding drinks. He was holding a mirror. Madison tilted her head at Malik's voice syrupy and false. Come on, don't be mad, Aaron, she said, dragging out his name like it was some inside joke. We're just having a little fun. Drew added, grinning. Lighten up, man. You look like you're about to teach a seminar on drink mixing. Malik scanned their faces. They weren't laughing at the drinks anymore. They were laughing at him, and they wanted a reaction. They were baiting him, enjoying the slow dismantling of someone's dignity, masked as humor. But instead of folding, Malik did something unexpected. He smiled. You're right, he said smoothly. I should lighten up. Let's have a little fun. For a moment, they blinked in confusion. Then Logan leaned back, flashing that smug grin. Now we're talking. But they didn't know they had just handed the mic to the wrong man. Malik picked up Logan's glass, rolled the golden liquid beneath the light. You know, he said softly, I think I made a mistake with this drink. Logan smirked. Oh yeah, Malik smiled again. Calm, steady. This drink isn't for everyone. And just like that, the air around them shifted. Malik swirled the glass gently in his hand, holding it to the light like a jeweler inspecting a diamond. You know, Logan, he said with a tone calm as ocean mist, I think I chose the wrong cocktail for you. Logan cocked an eyebrow. Oh yeah. Malik smiled, not smugly, but knowingly. This drink, it's not for everyone. It's an acquired taste. The kind that grows on you only if you've developed the refinement to appreciate it. There was a slight twitch in Logan's jaw, a ripple of confusion. Malik placed the glass back down with care, like setting a truth on the table. It's not about money, he continued. You can buy $1,000 bottle, but that doesn't mean you know what to do with it. Madison scoffed softly, but it sounded more like defense than mockery now. Drew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Malik turned to Madison. Ever had a wine pairing that actually made sense? One where the sommelier explained why this vintage fits that dish? She blinked. Yeah, I guess. He leaned in just a touch. And did you understand it? Or just nod and pretend to? She had no answer. The room got quieter. Madison opened her mouth but closed it again, her confidence suddenly slipping. Malik chuckled, not mockingly, but almost sadly, and shook his head. Funny, isn't it, he said softly. People love throwing out fancy names, Louis III, Yamazaki 18, Dom Perignon, but ask what makes them special. He let the sentence hang like a final note in a song. Silence. He straightened his cuffs, standing a little taller, not out of pride, but out of something stronger. Clarity. Luxury, he said, isn't about what you can buy. It's about what you understand. The words sank like stones into still water. Logan's smirk faded, if only slightly. Madison looked down at her untouched drink. Drew stared out toward the ocean, no longer playing along. Malik reached for the untouched glass of water on the table and placed it gently in front of Logan. Here, he said, maybe start with this. There was a beat of silence. Then from another table, a soft chuckle. Someone had heard, someone had understood. A flush crept up Logan's neck, slow and undeniable. For the first time that evening, he was the punchline, and he didn't like it. Logan tightened his grip on the water glass. The carefree arrogance had left his shoulders. The table, once brimming with jokes, now sat in strained quiet. Madison tapped her nails anxiously against the rim of her glass. Drew cleared his throat, desperate for a reset. All right, man, he forced a laugh. You got jokes. I respect that. Malik didn't laugh. He gave a small nod, nothing more. No jokes, he said. Just the truth. Logan leaned forward, his voice lower now. You think you're better than us? Malik met his eyes, calm, steady, unblinking. I think you assumed I wasn't, and that landed harder than anything else he could have said. The beach breeze swirled around them. Somewhere a server delivered food to a nearby table, the gentle clinking of plates, a strange soundtrack to the moment of reckoning. Madison sighed loudly, arms crossed. Ugh, whatever. Can we just get the check? Her voice had lost its charm. Her eyes darted anywhere but at Malik. Malik nodded, of course. He turned and walked away. Not quickly, not angrily, but with the unshakable grace of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. Instead of heading directly to the bar, Malik made a quiet detour. He paused at the VIP section, where an older gentleman sat alone, well-dressed, serene, with the kind of presence that didn't need to be announced. The man smiled as Malik approached and extended a hand. They shook like old friends. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Minutes later, Malik returned to table 7 and placed the checkbook between Logan and Drew. Logan scoffed as he picked it up. Sheesh. Good thing my card doesn't have a limit. But as he skimmed the bill, his smugness evaporated. His face froze. Madison leaned over. What? What is it? Drew took the bill and read it aloud. All drinks comped, with appreciation. From the owner, Madison frowned. Wait, who's the owner? Malik stepped back just enough to reveal the man in the VIP section. You just met him, he said quietly. Logan stared stunned. Madison's mouth hung slightly open. Malik's voice stayed soft, but his words carried weight. He's my father. He built this place 25 years ago. Started behind a bar, just like I did. Malik stood tall, his tone still gentle, but there was steel beneath every syllable now. I run this club with him, he said, but I like working the floor. It keeps me grounded. Logan shifted in his seat. His bravado had cracked. His voice, the sharp weapon of earlier, had vanished. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Malik tilted his head slightly. Still think I don't belong here, Logan didn't answer. And that silence, that was worth more than any tip. The group sat there caught in a moment they hadn't prepared for. A moment they thought they were orchestrating, but never truly owned. Drew let out a slow breath. Man, that's crazy. Madison, still recovering, looked between Malik and the VIP section. So, you're like rich. Malik shrugged. My family did well. But money doesn't mean much if you don't respect the people who keep places like this running. Madison straightened her posture, smoothing her hair, as if trying to rewind the night. We were just joking, you know? Nothing personal. Malik looked her straight in the eyes. Personal or not, it says a lot when you treat respect like an option. Table 7 now sat empty, just chairs, napkins, and half-finished drinks, but the air around it still vibrated with everything that had just happened. Malik approached the table with a cloth in hand, wiping down the surface as he always did. But tonight, every motion felt heavier and more sacred. This wasn't just about cleaning up. It was about honoring what had just been restored. Every drop of condensation he wiped away carried the weight of 1,000 unseen slights. Every crumpled napkin, a reminder of how far someone could push a man and how far that man could rise without breaking. A young staff member passed by and paused, glancing at the table, then back at Malik. I didn't know you were part owner, he said quietly. I just thought you were the best one here. Malik smiled softly. Then I've done something right. He looked around the lounge, the ambient lights, the polished glasses, the view of the sea beyond. Work every shift, he added, like you already own it. One day, maybe you will. The table was finally clean, but the warmth it left behind, that was the kind of presence no towel could wipe away. Malik stepped into the back room and checked his phone. One message blinked on the screen. She's awake. She asked for you. He dialed immediately. The line buzzed. Then Malik. His grandmother's voice was frail but alive. It trembled like old oak branches in the wind, but it still stood tall. I'm here, he said, his own voice tight with emotion. I saw the stars tonight, she whispered, and I thought of you. Are you okay, baby? He swallowed hard. I stood up, Grandma. I didn't stay quiet. I didn't shrink. A pause, then a tired but warm chuckle. You never had to get loud to be strong. You just had to remember who you are. He closed his eyes, tears prickling behind his lashes. I didn't let them make me feel small, he said. No, you didn't, she whispered. You made them see you. For Malik, that call was more than comfort. It was confirmation. In the quiet pride of her voice, he heard generations before him. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't just healing himself. He was healing history. That night, as the last guest lingered over dessert and the tide whispered to the shoreline, Malik noticed a trio sitting on the balcony, 2 black professionals and 1 Asian woman in business attire. Their posture was relaxed, but their eyes followed him closely. When he passed by, one of the men raised a hand gently. You were the one serving table 7, right? Malik paused. Yes, sir. We were sitting nearby, the man said. We heard it all. Malik's shoulders tensed. But then the man continued, his voice sincere. Thank you for saying what so many of us have swallowed. The woman nodded. You reminded me I'm not invisible, that I don't have to stay quiet to be respected. Malik didn't speak at first. He simply nodded, humbled by their words. These weren't strangers, they were witnesses. And in a world that often ignores what it doesn't want to see, having witnesses meant everything. You stood without yelling, the man said, and somehow you made them listen. Malik smiled, because this was more than a single confrontation. It was a ripple, and tonight it had finally begun to reach the shore. Later that evening, Malik sat alone in the back office. The ledger for next week's schedule lay open beside invoices and supplier notes. But in his hands was something far more important, an old photo of his father. It was black and white, slightly faded. His father stood behind the original bar. No uniform, no title, just a towel over his shoulder and a fire in his eyes. Underneath the photo, scrawled in pen, was a single line: true ownership isn't about wearing a suit. It's about holding your dignity where others drop theirs. Malik stared at the words. He thought about how many times he'd been told to smile more, to stay professional, to be the bigger person, all unspoken codes for don't make them uncomfortable. But tonight, he hadn't stayed small. He hadn't accepted the lesser role. He had told the truth with presence, with pride. And that wasn't in the job description. It was in the legacy. The lounge was closed, the lights dimmed to soft amber. Malik stepped outside to the beach, his shoes in one hand, bare feet pressing into the cool sand. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the waves. A breeze brushed against his face, whispering quiet reassurance. He walked to the water's edge and stood there, still silent. He thought of every time he'd been told, in words or glances, that he didn't belong. He thought of every night he'd gone home tired, but smiling anyway. Every tip that came with a side of pity. Every laugh that wasn't really funny. And he thought of tonight. Of standing his ground without anger. Of claiming his place without having to shout. He didn't need to fight anymore. He had already won. Not because they changed their minds, but because he hadn't let them change his soul. As he stood before the vast ocean, the wind wrapped around him like an old friend. Malik breathed deep, lifted his face to the moon, and whispered the words he knew his father would have said. You did good, son. You stood still, and they saw you. Though the laughter had faded, the energy around Table 7 lingered. It wasn't just a memory, it was a shift. Malik approached with his cloth in hand, wiping down the surface like he always did. But this time every motion held more meaning. He didn't just see crumbs and water rings, he saw echoes. Echoes of tension, of restraint, of truth. Every stain he wiped away was more than residue. It was residue of judgment. And Malik cleaned it not with duty, but with quiet triumph. A young server passed by, pausing when he saw Malik. I had no idea you were part owner, he said in a hush. I just thought you were the best at what you do. Malik smiled gently. That's enough, isn't it? Then he added, work like you own the place, because one day maybe you will. The server nodded, struck silent by the simplicity of those words. Malik looked out over the lounge, the soft lights, the music, the ocean. This space, once a symbol of distance, now felt a little more honest, a little more equal. Because sometimes all it takes is one man standing still for everyone else to take a step back and look again. As the night deepened, Malik returned to the staff lounge to check his phone. A single message blinked on the screen from the hospital nurse. She woke up. She asked if you were okay. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed. One ring, two, then her voice, fragile, worn, but unmistakable. Malik, I'm here, he whispered, barely able to contain the storm inside. You sounded heavy last time, she murmured. You all right now? He paused. Then I stood up for myself tonight. Grandma, I didn't let them walk over me. I said what needed to be said. There was a silence on the other end. Then came her soft laughter like wind through tall grass. My boy, you didn't have to raise your voice. You just had to raise your spirit. Tears blurred his vision. I didn't break, he said. No, baby, she replied. You made them bend. For Malik, those words weren't just comfort, they were a crown. Because in a world that often demanded silence from people like him tonight, he had chosen to speak. And the one voice that mattered most had heard him. Later that night, as Malik moved between closing duties, he noticed three figures sitting near the edge of the lounge balcony. Two black professionals, one Asian woman. They looked refined, but more than that, they looked deeply moved. When he passed by, one of them gestured for him to come closer. You were the one who served them, right? The older man asked. Malik nodded cautiously. Yes. We were at the next table, he said. We heard everything. Malik waited. He wasn't sure what to expect. But the woman leaned forward, her voice steady and full of weight. You said what so many of us never get the chance to. The third person, younger, added, you reminded me that standing tall doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it's just refusing to lower your head. Malik felt the lump rise in his throat. He didn't speak, he just nodded slowly. Because it wasn't about applause. It wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing others, the quiet faces who live in the background, waiting for someone to remind them of their worth. Tonight, Malik had been that someone. And in that, he found his true reward. The lounge had emptied, the lights were low. Malik sat alone in the office, the buzz of the night now just memory. He stared at the spreadsheet for next week's shifts, but it blurred against the real weight in his hands. An old photograph. His father behind the bar years ago, smiling sleeves, rolled up towel on shoulder. A time when respect wasn't guaranteed, when every nod had to be earned. Scrawled on the back of the photo in faded ink were words Malik had read 100 times before. Don't wear your dignity like a badge. Wear it like your skin, quiet, constant, impossible to take off. Malik looked down at his own hands, strong, steady, worn from labor. He thought about the night's silence, the stunned faces, the shifted air. He hadn't cursed, he hadn't raised his tone. He had simply refused to be made small. That's not something you find in a training manual. That's not something you list on your resume. But it might just be the most important thing a man can carry in this world. Malik slipped off his shoes and walked out to the shoreline, letting the cool sand press into his bare feet. The waves whispered in the dark, the moon casting long silver ribbons across the water. He stood there for a long time, no music, no laughter, just the breath of the sea and the hush of wind against his skin. This wasn't about revenge, not about validation. It was about reclaiming something no one else could give him. He thought of all the nights he'd bit his tongue, all the moments he'd let jokes pass, all the times people had mistaken his silence for weakness. But not tonight. Tonight he didn't raise his fists, he didn't make a scene. He just stood still. And for once the world moved around him. He closed his eyes, hearing the soft rhythm of waves. His father would be proud. His grandmother already was. And Malik, he was finally proud of himself. For not stepping back. For not shrinking. For letting the world see who he truly was. Not a waiter. A man who stood his ground and reminded others to rise. The sun rose over Clearwater like it always did, warm, golden, unapologetically bright. The Horizon Lounge hadn't opened yet, but Malik was already inside. He liked being the first in before the chatter, before the clinking glasses. Just the hum of lights, the smell of wood polish, and the whisper of the sea beyond the windows. He walked the lounge, slowly touching each chair back into place, checking every glass behind the bar. The space felt lighter, like it too had exhaled something heavy the night before. He stopped in front of the mirror behind the bar and looked at himself. Same uniform, same calm eyes, but something inside had shifted. He didn't need the public apology. He didn't crave headlines or praise. What he carried now was better. Clarity. He was still Malik Sanders, the man behind the counter. Still the one with towel in hand, perfect posture, and quiet strength. But now when people looked at him, they saw more than a server. And more importantly, so did he. That afternoon, Malik checked his phone between shifts. A new number, one short message. We owe you more than a tip. Last night made us stop and think. Not about the drinks, about ourselves. Thank you. D. There was no need to ask who D was. Malik stared at the screen for a long while, thumb hovering over the reply button. But then he put the phone down. Because growth isn't always loud, and sometimes the best response is no response at all. He didn't need to say, I forgive you. He didn't need to comfort those who'd once belittled him. That was their journey now, their reflection to face, their mirror to clean. Malik had done his part. He'd spoken with dignity, stood with grace. And for once, someone who had laughed at him had chosen to listen. Even if the apology came as a whisper, it still mattered. Because it proved something powerful. The right words at the right time from the right person can change everything. Later that night, Malik found a small, brown-wrapped package on his office desk. No name, no note, just tied with twine. He opened it slowly. Inside was a wooden frame, and in it, a photo. It was him captured in that pivotal moment, standing at table 7, placing a glass of water in front of Logan with perfect calm. The image wasn't posed. It wasn't glamorous. But it radiated something unshakable. Composure, strength, truth. On the back of the frame, scrawled in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Sometimes one man standing still can reset the entire room." Malik held the frame in both hands for a long time. It didn't matter who had taken the photo. What mattered was that someone saw him, really saw him, not as background, not as a servant, but as a force. And that photo didn't just freeze a moment in time, it captured a legacy. Over the next few days, business returned to normal. The lounge filled with clinking cutlery and soft jazz. Sunset spilled gold over cocktails. Tourists came and went, but something had changed, something in the air, in the way people looked at Malik. They nodded now, a little longer, a little deeper. No words needed, just recognition. One guest left a note on a napkin. "Thank you for reminding me what grace looks like." Another, a middle-aged couple, offered a tip without flourish, just eye contact and a genuine thank you. Malik never sought attention. He didn't need applause. But every time someone looked at him, without condescension, every time they saw him, not as the help, but as a human, it added something back into the space that had long been missing. Respect. And not the kind you demand. The kind you earn by refusing to disappear when people try to erase you. One quiet Sunday night, long after the final table had cleared and the doors were locked, Malik stood alone on the balcony overlooking the ocean. In his hand was an old leather notebook, his father's. The back page held a single sentence, faded by time: "Real service isn't what you do for others. It's what you preserve in yourself while doing it." Malik let the wind turn the page. He thought of everything: his grandmother's voice, his father's lessons, the tourist's mockery, the silence that followed. And he knew something for sure. He had not only served food, he had served a lesson, a reminder, a mirror. He walked back into the empty lounge, turned off the last light, and stood by the door. Tonight, he wasn't just anything. He was Malik Sanders, a man who had stood his ground with a glass in his hand and dignity in his heart. Respect isn't earned by how much money you carry, but by how you treat those you think can't do anything for you. Malik didn't fight fire with fire. He didn't shout. He didn't demand. He simply stood his ground with truth, restraint, and quiet power. And in doing so, he reminded the world that no matter where you stand, your dignity is yours to protect and yours to define.